Hello and welcome to part 2 of my beginner Conquest tutorial. In the last tutorial you learned how the game works, and in this tutorial you're going to learn some of the basic strategies, the basic ideas, the foundations of some Conquest theory, and how you can start pushing yourself into intermediate level play towards the end. So the first thing is you need to be familiar with all of these units. Now, let's just go through some of the units and what their main features are. So, the 100 damage units are the Scout, Foot Soldier, and Archer. The Scout can move very far. He has 6 movement. So, the Scout is also a very important unit because he's cheap. He only costs 25 squad resources. So the Scout can hit far away, and if we buff him up with commands, he can also hit very hard. So he's going to be an important backbone of many strategies. The Foot Soldier has 300 health from, so the Foot Soldier is going to be a bit of a tank when you're playing these games. The Halberd has 200 damage, and he has 2 extra range, along with 200 health. So he can take a hit from any of the 100 damage units. He is particularly the bane of archers because they can hit something that's 6 squares away, and the halberd can move 4 and then hit 2, which is exactly where the archer would be. So the halberd is kind of the bane of archers many times. So the archer is very slow. He has only 3 movement, but he can hit 6 squares away. So that's 9 in total. And he starts to become expensive. He costs 100, but notice he has very low health, so he's going to be weak to scouts. When we go over some of these commands, you'll see why. Same thing with the mage. The mage is also a weak unit. She has 100 health, costs 100, so very much like a glass cannon, she has 200 damage and 4 range. Now, knights are a lot better than mages and archers. They have 300 damage and 300 health. However, they're still going to be weak to scouts, as we'll be covering later. Champions are a very important unit to have. So champions have 400 damage and 500 health. So 500 is a lot more than any of these other units can hit. Now, a lot of the strategies are going to be revolving around champions and their weaknesses in particular, which is what we have commands for. These commands are going to give us the different weaknesses we can exploit from our opponent. So first and foremost is Battle Cry. This is going to give a unit 200 damage and 200 health. So not only is your unit going to be able to deal more damage, but he's also going to be able to take a bit more damage. So the champion that has 500 health, he's going to be pushed up to 700 health and 600 damage. If he's at full health, he's going to be pretty much invincible, unless the opponent has some of the more expensive commands, as we'll see in a few seconds. But Battle Cry is one of the commands you start off with, and I would recommend you always have Battle Cry. I have not seen any successful strategies in high-level play that do not use Battle Cry. And second, to form the backbone of our strategy is going to be Charge. So Battle Cry and Charge. Charge lets you move a unit double the distance. So with Battle Cry, he gains 200 damage, and Charge he gains twice the distance. So you put Charge and Battle Cry on a scout. The scout's going to hit something for 300 damage at 13 squares away. So if the scout is on the 7th row of the board, then the scout's going to be able to hit pretty much anywhere on the board. So you can attack something very hard from almost anywhere. So Battle Cry and Charge, these are the 2 commands you really want to save for something important. You want to get something that's worthwhile. So, for example, Scout might use Charge and Battle Cry on a Knight, because the Knight has exactly 300 health, and he's worth 100 squad resources, 100 command points. You don't really want to use charge and battle cry on foot soldiers because they are very inexpensive. You want to use it on something that's more worthwhile. So halberds are a good second option. They cost 75. And another thing is going to be champions. If you hit them with a scout that uses charge and battle cry, the champion is going to be down to 200 health. And from there you have many different options to take out the champion. You can use another scout with charge and battle cry. You can use the extra range on a halberd to perhaps charge the champion later and take off that 200 health. I would not recommend using any archers or mages, but they're still an option to be aware of. Maybe you're playing someone who's using archers and mages, and you have to be aware that they can use these commands on them as well. Knights could also potentially kill this champion, or you could use your own champion. He's going to have a lot more health, and when you're buffing him up with your own commands, that 200 HP champion's not going to stand a chance even if he has his own commands. So battle cry and charge form the backbone of your strategy. Or of most strategies, I should say. So next up is Stoicism. It gives you 400 health until the start of your next turn. Now with Stoicism, let's say I use it on a champion who's at full HP, so he goes up to 900 HP. The enemy halberd comes along and smacks my champion for 200 damage. Well, when it's the start of my next turn, my champion is still going to be at full health, because it takes away the health from the Stoicism before it takes away from the champion's actual HP. It's a very general purpose command, just to let you tank some extra damage. Maybe you've got one of your units over in their base, and you have to do as much damage as possible. Stoicism lets you survive another turn. Or you could use it to defend. Maybe they're over in your base, and you have to use it to protect one of your more important units. Similarly, Chastise can also have a dual purpose. It makes it so your opponent cannot select a unit. However, this unit will be able to counterattack if you don't defeat them. So that's a common mistake I see a lot of players getting into. So Chastise will allow you to stop a unit in its place for one turn, and it has a cooldown of 3. That's very short, and it costs 50. It's not very expensive. In addition, you can walk up and you can attack one of the enemies if they don't have Chastise themselves by walking up and using Chastise. They might be forced to use a command to defend, or best case, they don't have any commands to defend themselves. However, walking up and using Chastise is not a good idea if they can use Chastise back on you. Then there's Regenerate. Regenerate will allow you to heal off any of the damage one of your units has taken. This is mostly used on champions. I can't really think of anything else it's commonly used for in top level play. It's gonna make it so that the enemy can't really use charge and battle cry on your champions, because you'll just be able to regenerate that damage off. However, you have to remember that regenerate is a costly command. It costs 150 squad resources. That's also going to mean it costs 150 command points. You're going to have to store up a lot in order to regenerate. So that's one of the drawbacks to using regenerate. Vigilance is also a cheap command that cools down quickly. It makes it so that your troop will counterattack first when the enemy is trying to attack you. You're only going to counterattack if you're in range of the enemy, of course. So if you use Vigilance on a champion and they end up hitting you with a halberd, your Vigilance won't do anything. You also have to remember they can use some of these commands to negate some of that damage that you're counterattacking them with. Next, there's Bombard. It costs 200, it's very expensive, and it has a really short cooldown. You can use it every other turn, and it does 100 damage to any enemy unit. So Bombard is a particularly tricky command, so you not only can use Battle Cry on one of your champions to kill another champion, but you can use Bombard on a champion and then attack it with your own champion to kill it. So you don't really have to wait for this Battle Cry to cool down in order to kill another champion. But again, it's a very costly command. You have to store up a lot of command points in order to make use of it. Then there's Shield Wall. It'll reduce all of your damage to 100 until the start of your next turn. You have to remember, though, they can use Bombard and then attack you when you have Shield Wall, so that's 200 damage in total. So just beware that that might be something when you have Shield Wall. And finally, we have Winds of Fate. So a random command is going to get cooled down for you. Any of the commands that you currently have on cooldown. Now, this is cool if you like to, play dice games. You like to take a chance, which one are you going to get? Is it going to be the one that wins? But you don't really have to play this rolling the dice. Let's say you don't have any commands on cooldown. You could use Battle Cry and immediately use Winds of Fate, and since Battle Cry is your only command on cooldown, you're going to get the Battle Cry back, so there's no guessing in what you're going to get back. So let's think of how we might use some of these, past just the charge and Battle Cry. So some of the more obvious ones we can talk about are things like Regenerate. So let me get just a scout, Regenerate. So you're going to be able to charge in Battle Cry your enemy's expensive units, but if your only units are pretty much just 2 champions, you can squeeze in a Halberd and have some extra for something like Chastise or Shield Wall. But your enemy's not really going to be able to use Charge and Battle Cry on your champions, because you can just regenerate that damage off. I should say they can't use Charge and Battle Cry with a Scout, because that's only 300 damage. If they use it with a Knight or a Champion, your champion's going to be dead in one hit, and then your Regenerate won't have any use. So you have to find another command that goes well with Regenerate. Now, maybe all of these work, maybe they don't. Let's just try and think some of them through. Stoicism gives you some extra HP, so you could hit an enemy while you have Stoicism, and then you could regenerate all of that HP back. So this might be good if the enemy has Battle Cry and you use Stoicism to hit through that Battle Cry, and then you regenerate all of that damage back. That's actually one of the main tactics for using Stoicism and Regenerate in conjunction with one another. Now, you can also use Chastise. This is a very general purpose command. I would highly recommend it. It's very easy to use. And many times, you're put at a disadvantage if you don't have Chastise. Because, like I said, the enemy can walk up and use Chastise, and it's a very short cooldown, and you have to use one of your other commands, like Stoicism, which has a longer cooldown. So, another thing about Chastise, I should mention, is it doesn't work on the enemy's very last unit. So, if you get into an endgame and you have Chastise, you're actually at a disadvantage now, because that's effectively one more command you don't have. So next up is Vigilance. This might go with Regenerate. Probably not the best choice. It just means that you counterattack first. It doesn't really do anything to negate damage, I wouldn't say. And it's not exactly that defensive. Basically, Vigilance gets outclassed by every other command. They can use Battle Cry and nerf some of the damage. Stoicism will pretty much negate all the damage and have some left over. Chastise are going to freeze you. Bombard, Vigilance isn't going to do anything. Shield Wall is going to negate some of that damage. Regenerate, they can regenerate the damage off. So Vigilance is not a very good command if they have almost any other command that they can use. Perhaps you can find a tactic where by using vigilance you're forcing them to use another command. Maybe that's something you can look into, something you could try. Now, Bombard, does Bombard go very well with Regenerate? I think not. It's also a very expensive command. You don't really want to have two of the expensive commands with each other. Shield Wall might go very well with Regenerate. You can use the Shield Wall to soak up some extra damage before you have to regenerate. And it'll also cut any benefits they'll get from something like Battle Cry. So you can just hit straight through someone with Battle Cry and only take 100 damage. In addition, you could use Shield Wall with Battle Cry, and your unit will effectively be invincible for a turn. Now, Winds of Fate, does this go well with Regenerate? Actually, it might. So the idea is that you stall as much as you can, you get as many command points as you can. The limit is actually 1,000 in a game. But you stall as much as you can, and then you're going to be able to use Winds of Fate and Regenerate as often as you want, pretty much. So you're going to do something like have a champion approach and use Battle Cry, and with the extra health from the Battle Cry, they can't really do anything to you. And then you can use Winds of Fate and use Battle Cry again. If they ever try to hit you, you could just regenerate the damage off. And that's the basic concept behind Regenerate and Winds of Fate. You have to stay back. You can't be very aggressive until the very end. So some other tactics we could think of. Bombard. Bombard seems like a pretty obvious tactic. You're just going to camp in the corner for as long as you can. You're not going to really try to be very aggressive. You're just going to protect your champions because you only have 50 resources left over. And that's probably going to go to Chastise because, again, you want to stop them. You want to stall. You want to be defensive. Things like Shield Wall are used aggressively when you want to try to push yourself forward and attack the enemy. So with Bombard, it's probably going to be Chastise. So Winds of Fate we discussed. And then there are some of the more general purpose commands. So you could use something like Stoicism. This is very general purpose. It's very cheap. So you use Stoicism and some other cheap command like Chastise or Shield Wall. And you're going to have 125 squad resources left over if you have these 8 scouts and 2 champions. I would recommend you start with and then upgrade from there. You could upgrade to something like a foot soldier and 2 halberds. You could swap out this foot soldier and halberd for a scout and a knight. The knight can potentially kill a champion, but he's also a target for those scouts that use charge and battle cry, you have to remember. You could do 3 foot soldiers and 1 halberd, and you can mix and match plenty of different things. So you could use Stoicism and Chastise. There's also Stoicism and Shield Wall. The idea behind this is your champions are going to do as much damage to the enemy as possible. We call this rush because your champions are just rushing to the enemy to use these commands and to deal out some damage. And then when all of that mayhem is done, you have a second champion to bring up and just clean up whatever's remaining. Now there's also Vigilance. Again, Vigilance doesn't really do too much. It's probably the worst command of all of them. But hey, it's there. You have 25 more resources. Maybe you want that extra foot soldier. You could have like 2 foot soldiers, 2 halberds. Foot soldiers are particularly good for warding off enemy scouts because it's not worth using battle cry on the foot soldier. because your enemy's champion might recapture and then use charge and battle cry on your own champion. So they're going to get a whole champion out of it. You're just going to get a foot soldier from your use of battle cry. Now, the reason I was saying earlier that you can use charge and battle cry on a scout to kill something like a halberd is because you still have halberds to defend yourself with. Halberds are what you're going to use to stop enemy champions from incoming. If your halberd is up 3 or 4 spaces from your champion, the enemy champion cannot use charge and battle cry on your champion without getting hit by the halberd. So halberds do ward off enemy champions, very much so. And there is some debate on whether you should use charge and battle cry on a scout to kill the halberds first, or to get a champion first. But that's something for you to explore. So the set I am going to use is going to look something like this. And another basic and important concept is the formation. So your formation, you're going to want to be able to protect your expensive units, right? So we do that typically with a wall like this. So when an enemy, let's just say a champion is incoming, and we don't have that halberd up in order to ward him off, we can move a champion back in, and then we can either close the wall by moving a scout over here, and then they would have to move all the way around the wall to get to our champions, or perhaps they could try to put a hole in it first, and then we would close it again. We could bring our champions out whenever it's time to counterattack, or we can close the wall by pushing a halberd back, or maybe a foot soldier. You have to remember, all of these units are what are protected by our champions. These units over here aren't going to be protected. So this is particularly important if you have a set that can't use any halberds, like Bombard. Bombard doesn't have really any resources left over to have anything more than 8 scouts, so they're not going to have any halberds. So Bombard has to make a lot of use of boxing champions in. So now that I've explained some of the basic concepts to you, let's see how we can utilize them in a game. So the first thing you want to do is look at what your opponent has. You're going to want to calculate how much their units add up to, and then what they're going to have left over for commands. So champions are 200, so 400 for the 2 champions. Archers 100, that makes 500. A halberd is 75, so 575. A scout is another 25, so 600. 4 of them make 700, and a foot soldier makes 50, 750. So they have 250 squad resources left over for commands. So I'm going to gain some space with my scout here. So what could they do with this 250 left over for commands? Well, I said always have charge and battle cry. If they don't have one of those, you'll see very easily how you can take advantage of that. Perhaps I can get my opponent to waste either charge or battle cry, and I will counterattack them while they don't have it in use. So that leaves them 100 for 2 other commands. Now that's going to be one of the 250 resource commands. And that's either going to be, that's going to be 2 of one of these. Charge, or not charge, chastise, shield wall, or vigilance. So he's got 2 of those. Most likely. He might have stoicism and just not a third command, but that wouldn't make very much sense. Sometimes you do see it, however. So I started with my scout up 6 because his archer couldn't reach the scout there, and if he moved the archer up 3 spaces, the archer would die. So he moved his archer 2 spaces, and I moved my scout back 2 spaces just to keep it safe. So always count where your opponent can move and what you could do in order to, say, attack them or counterattack them. Now, my opponent's a fairly new player, so I'm guessing he's going to try to use charge, maybe on this archer, in order to kill a scout. So if I put one of my scouts next to him, he's going to be safe from the archer more or less, because my scout will be able to recapture. So it looks like he's being a bit shy with the archer there, but that's okay. Now, here we're going to use charge to take out his expensive archer. Now, his champion can move 4 spaces. This is going to be important in a second. But I'm going to use charge and take the archer. And this is going to net me some more command points. Charge cost 75 and the archer was 100. Now I'm also going to use stoicism. This is a very easy tactic you can employ. You just use stoicism while you have a second scout up at least 4 spaces from the front row. And now this scout is invincible for the most part. If he were a space closer, the enemy champion might kill him with battle cry potentially. But the threat is if he tries to use chastise on my scout, then I have the second scout to move up, and then I have a dual attack on him. So it seems my opponent has used charge in order to just trade scouts. Now he's used chastise. So he's used all his commands and all of his command points, if you've been counting. But now he doesn't have charge, so let's exploit that. So first thing, I'm just going to kill his scout. Now, one thing I could do is use battle cry on this scout to protect him, because you remember, battle cry has the dual purpose. However, I'd rather use battle cry to gain the extra damage, particularly with my champion. Now, an important concept is to count commands. And what I mean by that is you have to count the cooldown. So I know that he doesn't have charge until I have charge. Because when I use charge, right after that is when he used charge. So when I get charge, he gets charge. Not the other way around. So let me count where the halberd can move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces here. I'm going to move my scout up. And my scout is going to threaten to use battle cry on this halberd. Because if I can get the battle cry off without using charge, that's also a great thing for me to have. So he's going to go ahead and move his halberd back. And I guess I'm just going to intimidate him with this scout some more. Because I know he wants to move his halberd back when it's attacked. And another thing is, my champion, remember, can't get in charge battle cry range of his champions if his halberd is up at least 3 spaces from his champions. So what I want to do is threaten his halberd so he pushes it back another space. Otherwise, he's going to have the scout use battle cry on him. And right after that, we're going to be 1 turn away from using charge and battle cry, so I'll move my champion into position. So it seems he doesn't want to move his halberd, and that's fine by me. If I can save using charge, then I'm going to take the halberd for just the battle cry. Okay, so we know one of his commands is shield wall. So I'm just going to wait here for a turn because I know he can't do anything. And I'm going to move this foot soldier up. Now you want to have your units try to cover as much of the space that you're trying to protect as they can. So I move my foot soldier diagonally a little bit instead of diagonally all the way, because this way he controls the side over here and his scout won't be able to ride along the edge of the wall. So he's moved his halberd back. So I think I'm going to use charge and battle cry on one of his champions in order to weaken it. If I can be a whole champion up by capturing it with a second scout using charge and battle cry, that'll be a significant advantage for me as the game progresses. Another thing to remember is I could capture the halberd, and the halberd would get me the 75 extra points, but I think I'm a bit good on command points as of right now, so I'm going to attack this champion over here. If we can weaken one of his champions to 400 HP, that's also a good deal, as long as I didn't have to waste charge in order to use it, in order to do it. The 400 HP champion can be taken out by my champion without using battle cry, or I could take it out with 2 hits from a halberd, or just a halberd using battle cry. So the 400 HP champion isn't as good as the 500 HP champion. So my opponent has used charge, but it looks like he didn't get all the way in range because he didn't calculate all the way. He must have miscounted a square, I guess, but hey, it happens. So now again we know that he doesn't have charge until we get charge. So I'm going to move this other scout up and gain some space. Notice I'm not making any silly moves like just moving in blindly. I always have a plan when I'm moving in. So my champion has been staying back here. I did have a plan to perhaps move him up while he didn't have charge, because charge is what you really have to watch out for. So his halberd can attack up to right here. I'm going to move this other scout just where he can't attack. So his halberd is no longer 3 spaces ahead of his champions, which means that I can move into charge and battle cry range safely. Because look, his halberd can reach right over here, and when I move my champion up, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He can reach either one of his 2 champions. And I don't have to suffer the consequences of getting hit from the halberd. Now this might be dangerous if I didn't have stoicism. He could potentially use chastise, and just like that, and then he would have charge and battle cry. However, because I have stoicism and I'm going to have just enough command points for the charge and battle cry, I don't have to worry about that. I still have 2 targets and he can't defend them both. So I'm going to put my halberd up 4 spaces from my champion in case he tries to counterattack with his champion, perhaps. Now, I mentioned that Chastise has a dual purpose of being defensive and offensive, So you saw my opponent using it to be defensive to try to stop this champion from using charge and battle cry. However, you'll see me using it in order to disable the enemy champion when he only has one. So the scout using charge actually isn't a big deal. In fact, I don't even have to use charge and battle cry right now. I could just recapture the scout because he can't really do anything. So now I know he still doesn't have any charge to use. And if he tries to walk up with, say, that halberd or maybe a champion, I could just chastise it in place. Or there would be nothing to stop me from using charge and battle cry. So this champion on the right is the one that has 500 HP, and now we're going to take it out in one hit with charge and battle cry. When you're attacking a unit and you're attacking their whole base, like I'm doing right now, always try to stand next to some other unit that you want to attack. So let's say, for example, I wanted to kill the foot soldier next for whatever reason. If the foot soldier tries to move away, then I could still catch him and kill him. But if the foot soldier was over one space and I wasn't standing next to him, the foot soldier could move away 4 spaces, and then I wouldn't be able to catch him or kill him. So this is one of the intermediate kind of concepts. When you're making a set, you could actually make it so that your units are spread apart so that they can't stand next to one of your units. So he used Battle Cry, but unfortunately this champion doesn't have enough HP to survive the counterattack. And now he uses Chastise, but to no avail. So now that we know he doesn't have Battle Cry, and my foot soldier is particularly close, I can actually use my foot soldier to move in. And since I want his scout to stay put, because I want to kill that, I'm going to go ahead and use Chastise on this scout, so he can't move away. So here I'm going to use Stoicism to attack the enemy halberd. The Stoicism is going to give my foot soldier enough HP to survive any incoming damage. In addition, Shield Wall is going to be useless on his halberd now, because the halberd is only at 100 HP. So here I have a dual attack on this halberd, although if he protects the halberd somehow, then I still have Battle Cry to use on the foot soldier. So there you can see my opponent is running out of time, and it looks like he just barely makes it. Now the reason he might have wanted to kill that scout instead of this foot soldier is the foot soldier only has 100 HP like the scout, but he has less movement. So it might not look like it at first, but my halberd is actually in charge range of both of my other units. So if he decides to capture with charge like he's about to do, then I can use charge to recapture. In addition, he can't use chastise on a single unit to prevent that recapture. And he can't use shield wall to defend his 100 HP halberd. And thus ends the game for the most part. So now I think I'm going to use Bombard. Bombard is a very stally set. There it is, Bombard. And I'm going to have these two champions that I want to keep at full health for as long as I can. So in order to do that, we have to make effective use of a wall. So this appears to be the same set as last time. Let's see how he changed it up. He probably swapped out one of those 50-point commands. He might have Vigilance and Shield Wall now. A lot of new players like to use Vigilance, not realizing that it's outclassed by all of the other commands. So Vigilance, I very much do not recommend you use for the most part. I do have some videos where I showed some analysis with Vigilance, and even those were very tough games to play. So his foot soldier cannot reach here. So I'm actually just going to dance around with this scout. For the most part, you can leave the scout back here. But if he's got something like an archer, it's going to stop the archer from moving 3 whole spaces. Now, if we want to stall, it looks like our opponent is being a bit intimidated by our scout. He doesn't want to move the whole 4 spaces for whatever reason. So I'm just going to dance around with my scout, and then eventually I'm just going to put him back over here, if that's what I need to do. And it looks like he's pulling his foot soldier back. So I'm going to take this opportunity to actually use charge on his archer. Now, I always like having my units as far away from my base as possible when I'm capturing, unless I have a specific purpose, like I'm going to recapture it immediately after. Yes, so remember, player 2 starts with 25 extra command points. This is to offset player 1 getting to move first. Most of the time it results in player 2 having an advantage because commands are actually what are more important than just being able to move your unit first. So oftentimes there's much battle over who gets to use charge and battle cry first, because that's the person who's going to have more material first. So there have been some clever ways in which people have gotten to use charge and battle cry first as player 1, despite not having the 25 extra command points at the start. And that's some of the more intermediate and higher level play kind of stuff. So here I'm just gonna keep my... Okay, shield wall. He's gonna... Okay, I'm just gonna move my scout back then. Keep it in range of both of my champions. All of my scouts are in range of both champions. So he can't do some gimmick like use charge on a scout and then chastise my champion that's defending him. So it appears he's trying to do something clever. Used battle cry to defend instead of, I would guess, vigilance. Now I have two options. I can use chastise and then perhaps he uses vigilance, or I could use battle cry. If he uses vigilance, I pretty much have to use battle cry in order to get rid of him. So I'm gonna use battle cry anyway, because I don't want to waste the extra command points using chastise. I still have a dangerous tactic to use bombard and charge on one of his champions, because I know he doesn't have charge for the next 5 turns. Or rather the next 4 turns, because that was the first turn. So I'm actually fine to just sit here for 2 moves, because they all have charge and bombard. So I'm using my scout to try to push his champion back, and if he doesn't want to move it back, then the champion gets weakened by the scout. Ooh, so he used shield wall on his halberd, even though that's not what I want to capture. I want to capture his champion, and I'm gonna have the battle cry to do it. So just like that, Bombard can take out 2 champions if you let it. When using Bombard, you really want to save most of your command points until the end, when you're going to be using it a lot. Because when you're playing Bombard, if you use it too early, then your opponent can just move something up to attack you when you don't have any command points. And it looks like he doesn't have any command points to kill my champion now, which is interesting. So Bombard, you only want to use your Bombards if you're doing something like I did, where you took, 2 champions at once. Or it's the end game and you're starting to pick off the units with your extra command points. Or if the enemy is approaching you and you have to use Bombard to defend yourself. Those are really the only times you should use Bombard. You shouldn't use it in the middle of the game to attack like a random scout. That's not going to work out for you. That's going to be to your detriment. So let's recap some of the key concepts we've been talking about in this final game I'm showing you. So there's always counting squares where your opponent can move. So I had been keeping my scout out of range of the enemy archer, and the archer had been staying out of range of my scout. So I am staying out of charge range of his archer, and he's staying out of charge range of my scouts. My scouts, however, have more charge range than the archer does, so it's not going to be a win for the archer. In addition, we are only using commands when we can gain something out of the commands. My opponent has been using commands just to trade like scouts. When I say trade, I mean I'm trading something like one of my scouts for an archer. The scout's 25 and the archer is 100. We also have this plan to stall in the corner. And we have to stick with that plan. So I've been stalling around with this scout, just moving him around. And my opponent can't really seem to grasp how to approach me, how he might break through my barricade. So these things aren't really bait. It might seem like bait, but I would just call that what he did a bad move. So I'm going to actually move this scout out in order to capture. But no, that was not bait for him to just go charge with his scout. Sometimes they are, sometimes it's a trap. Like, maybe it looks like a free champion, but, then you have both of your champions taken out later. But in this case, it was just a scout, and I just recaptured. There was no bait or anything to it. It wasn't free, so wasn't bait at all. And now you see my opponent is using Chastise on something like a scout when he's not going to benefit anything from that Chastise. I have more scouts to move up, and now I can move this up at least 4 spaces because I know he doesn't have charge anymore. And I'm looking to just charge his archer. I'm going after the expensive and the weak units first. Now we also have to anticipate what our opponent's plan might be. In this particular case, it looks like my opponent doesn't really know what he's trying to do. You saw he just used charge to trade scouts. He's honestly just trying to stay back with this archer. But staying back is not what you really want to do in this kind of situation. When I'm trying to stall, the longer I stall, the more damage I have just to use random bombards. Now, I'm not at all fearful of his champion getting a counterattack on me, because I have both a wall to hide behind, and I have Battle Cry in case he comes within range of my champions. It's also going to take him a few turns just to get over here, so there's not really anything for me to worry about. So if you'd like to play some higher end games or maybe just find people of your own strength, you can join our friends chat. It's called Mob Conquest, spelled just like that. There are also people in there who do mobilizing armies. So you'll see this in my intermediate tutorial, but perhaps you can already think of what I'm going to say. If you're playing against a set that wants to stall, such as Bombard, what might you do? I'll leave you all to ponder on that question.